Hello, everybody. Daniel Krippner, working for ITAS, that is a Bosch subsidiary, for decades. I've been a software guy also for decades, and I have been privileged enough and lucky enough to be at the right time, right place to essentially be one of the, let's say, founders or instigators for this work group. So happy to see that we're still going and looking forward to the panel.
Thank you, Daniel. Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul Sherwood. I'm the chairman of CodeThink, and I joined CodeThink in 2010 to learn about open source. I've had a long and reasonably successful career in software engineering, software services mainly, but I'm also an award-winning feature film producer.
Oh, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, which translates as loss-making feature film producer.
Hi everyone, my name is Flo. I'm from the Open Hardware Foundation. I'm the head of Open Hardware Foundation. We are making industrial grade open source RISC-V cores. We believe, especially with the software-defined vehicle, that's part of the future where we bring all this together, where software and hardware can be co-developed. Unfortunately, I don't have any awards so far, but who knows? At least no losses. Oh.
Hello, my name is Markus Schu. So I'm from Accenture. I've been, let's say, acquired, so I have a lot of history in my company life. Also, I started in semiconductor companies already. And I'm with the S-Core project now. Before it was an incubator since 1 year. And now I'm happy to contribute to my knowledge about safety and security. We got really also awards. So I reached with our company that we get a cybersecurity management system certified. So that means it's like an award, I would say. From Exida, by the way.
Hello, everyone. I'm Frédéric Desbien. I manage embedded and IoT programs at the Eclipse Foundation. And I also have the pleasure, for the time being, hopefully it won't be too long, but for the time being, I'm also the project lead for Eclipse ThreadX. Eclipse ThreadX being the first and only real-time operating system certified for safety critical applications. And we intend to keep it that way.
Thank you. So I think it's a great set of panelists that we have here. And as I saw as an observer during all day, I think it's a very important topic. So I will start with a very light question. We have been going through all your sessions during the day, which brought a lot of clarity, but this is a thought-provoking as well. So I think you demonstrated some ways where open source collaboration contributes to the development and maintenance of safety critical software and hardware, potentially. The question here is, what are the potential risks involved in doing this?
One of the risks if we are developing this functional safety hardware, for example, is that our hardware becomes more secure, more safe, and is behaving in a more predictable way. So that's obviously a good thing what we want to come out. If we are not doing it, the biggest risk actually, if we are not doing it in open source, I see is that we are not reaching this kind of safety level, or that we will have in the future more incumbents who are using something in-house made where potential risks are still inside. So your question, what is the risk in open source development? I would like to actually turn it around and say, doing it in open source, we are having less risks, we are having more eyeballs on it. So I see this as a great possibility where we can all collaborate in making things more safe and more secure.
Any viewpoint from the software guys? Oh.
Well, and this is from my standpoint as the project lead for ThreadX there, not necessarily what I do at the foundation, but essentially safety is important. We want to keep ThreadX certified. But this in its own way can become a barrier to contribution. Open source ecosystems are great because in theory, everyone interested can pitch in. Now, in order to keep a code base certified, we need to be more stringent about what we accept in. And so this means additional requirements, additional documentation, and things that could scare some potential contributors away. Of course, there are ways to address that: outreach, education, streamlining of the processes. There are many, many great things that I'm sure our specialists there can contribute. But certainly that would be my fear, that people stay away because this is intimidating. And it shouldn't be, in the sense that if you have clearly defined processes, clearly defined requirements in terms of what people should submit when they come with a contribution, then things should be mostly fine.
Mm-hmm. I think we've got a political risk. The open source communities in general, when asked about safety, will shy away because they don't want to be involved in that. Thank you very much. They don't want to feel that they're responsible as part of their hobby for people's lives. I do think there's a risk if we get the models wrong, that will scare people away, as you've said, Filipe. So one of the questions I've been asking people in Eclipse already is how we're going to deal with this certification question. Because it seems to me that the people putting open source software into target vehicles or target devices in general are the ones that should be accepting the liability, and they're the ones that should be finally making sure that they are making the safety promises, right? And as long as there is segmentation that way, then I think we have a chance of getting it right. But imagine how disastrous it's going to be if someone sees the work that Red Hat's doing, or the work that CodeThink's doing, or the work that Electrobit's doing, and somehow misinterprets that and says, oh, Linux is safe now, puts it into something, and then we have a whole load of accidents. That would set us back. So we've got to be very clear that this is not a game. The open source communities in general that we're working with and talking about are serious, but we can't accidentally expose them to the kind of collateral damage of doing it wrongly.
And how can we work with the certification bodies to make sure that they help us make clear that the ones that are building products out of this software are the ones liable for making a safety critical piece of software or hardware?
Speak up.
I was asked, is it better?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I was asking, so what work do we need to do with certification bodies to make sure that it's very clear for the consumers of the software and the hardware that is open source and that is trustable, like you are working on, that is potentially certifiable, like some of the work that you have been working on, or that is certified? How can we work with those certification bodies so that they help us with the companies that they are the ones responsible for the liability, so that it doesn't happen what you just said, which is I take a piece of software from you protocol, I put it on the car, and the car crashes, kills someone, and then he says, oh, I thought this was safe. How do we do that? How do we work within this working group? How we work with those certification bodies? What's your view on that?
I can answer it.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Just one thought on your question. Back in Friedrichshafen a couple of years ago, there was someone from a certification company, I think from Switzerland, in the group. Is there anyone here today from a certification body company? So there's our problem right there.
Yeah, exactly. Very good.
Well, I completely agree. So there are some people from the certification community who are increasingly being active, right? So you'll see them on LinkedIn, you'll see them speaking at conferences, right? And that already is a big step, because historically safety is very secretive and people don't want to be out there in the open, having their reputation nailed to safety necessarily in the public domain. I think we've got to encourage people from all of the certification bodies to want to participate, but they're also at risk.
Yeah.
Their reputation is on the line if they certify the wrong things, right? So somehow we've got to help them understand a better model. And that's one of the things that we found feasible with Exeter. It's taken some time as they've got used to these wacky ideas the software people are throwing at them.
Yeah.
But they're now seeing that they can improve the efficiency of their work. So, you know, it's trying to encourage people to be less shy and understand that this is serious. And we're not going to accidentally dismiss all of the work that's been done over the last decades.
Any?
I'm not sure. I want to say maybe I think the EU already recognized that open source come more and more, and they change already the product liability law. Maybe, I don't know, you know it already from next year on. If you bring software on the market, open source, AI, cybersecurity, you are liable, independent if you have produced it. But if you use it in a product, then you can, you are under the product liability law. And that means we as a company or whatever, we have to prepare for that. So if you use open source, whoever has produced, and I make a product for that, I'm in the liability chain. That's already there.
Yeah, it's a great point. And that reminds me, I had the pleasure to attend the first Cybersecurity Regulation Act meeting from the Eclipse Foundation, right? ORC a month ago or so. And I think you, Paul, was there as well, right? And we had representatives from the European Union doing a talk to us. But like you said, Daniel, there is no one here. And so I think that's one step further, that most likely we need to work together to bridge the gap and bring them here to these discussions and join them, for example, on one of these panels.
Yeah. What I want to add there is that, of course, what we're doing specifically with ThreadX is that we're doing certification out of context. So part of the solution and part of the collaboration is around the messaging, in the sense that we won't pretend that this will work perfectly out of the box on the specific hardware platform in a specific mission critical situation. We're doing part of the work in our open source project. And this means there's potential to explore streamlining some of those things for projects that would have the same aims, in the sense that maybe we can find shortcuts working with those certification bodies, so that at least projects that want to go in that direction can do part of the work in the open. And then, of course, a commercial player should assume the liability for the final product. So if we are clear about that, I think we should be fine in terms of managing the liability or the risk, because it wouldn't be Linux or ThreadX that's failing, but a specific product by a specific manufacturer there.
Would you allow me to
make
a spin of your question
also
to the panel, because I don't have an answer. But like observationally, and this might probably not true in all cases, but an observation that I make for myself is that unless something is in this area, like safety certification, assessments, etc., unless something is written down in an ISO standard, yes, they rip you off for the work of others. But unless something is written down there, many people out there in the field will not accept an approach, a tool, a method, because it's, nobody ever got fired for doing something that's written down in an ISO standard. But conversely, if what we propose to do isn't written down, is that going to be a problem? / how do we maybe think about that or approach that? Do we want to get TSF into ISO pass 8927 or something?
Okay. So one way to not worry about those people is to wait for them to all retire or die. And some of them have already died. Lots of them have already died. Let's be clear. The fact is that the world is changing, right? We are dealing with much more complex systems and software now than those standards were designed for. The methods for software engineering and hardware engineering have evolved, and safety has not been evolving fast enough. The newer generation of people that are involved in safety are either, I would say, falling into two camps. They're either people who are aware of the changes that have happened and are trying to reconcile what they know about the reality of the engineering they're doing versus the standards. And then the other camp are the people who are literally just checking the box. And the senior members of the safety community will happily say, just checking the box was never the recipe for safety. There's no substitute for people who have to actually do the thinking, right? So well,
Co-pilot.
I must say I was very worried when John showed that video talking about using AI for safety. So, but I'll leave it there on that bombshell.
So one thing I will add there, the Eclipse Foundation has started in the last 2-3 years engaging with standards organization in general. So now we have the past submitter status, for example, at ISO IEC JTC1, which means, you know, personally, I was involved in some of those subcommittees, not around safety, but around other things. And the thing that I discovered is that many of those people are not truly knowledgeable about open source or many other things. They are deeply focused on specific areas, and they are well-meaning for most of them. and so the thing there, maybe the key is to engage more on their side of things as well. And I'm not saying that everyone should join the friendly subcommittee administering 26.26.2, let's say, but that's certainly one thing where if we don't show up there, they won't hear our part of the story as well. So I would strongly recommend an outreach strategy there, you know, with selected individuals, but anyone in this room, you can join your national body, be on the mirror committee, and even get drafts, copies of those standards. And that's typically the way the experts, because they don't get free copies. That's how they will circulate the final drafts among themselves to get access to those documents themselves. So, you know, please join your national body. Please get involved at some level and make a difference there. And I think that's one way. Now, making a difference there is not necessarily easy. That's a long-term process, but that's the thing. If we don't start at least showing up a bit and showing interest in what's done there, even if there are things we don't care about or we feel are not appropriate, I think we are missing part of the equation.
Is it just, again, for everybody, but also you guys, is it worthwhile keeping this in mind? Like, you know, don't know, later this year, maybe when we've done more stuff around TSF, whatever, we have something like a think workshop group about like outreach strategy to kind of get this stuff into more places. Should we make a note of that, a mental one?
That sounds good.
We'll do that anyway.
I noted it all.
Thank you.
And from your perspective, do you think it's a lack of knowledge of what we are doing, a fear of transparency, or again, not even willing to engage with us?
It depends on the individual. I had one very strongly opinionated person tell me, well, if you care about security, so his focus was security in this case, you know, you should only use proprietary software. It's more secure because there are companies backing it. So yes. so you know, there's a gradation there. No, well, there's a gradation. This is one extreme case. Others are much closer to what we do. And a good example is the great work we do around our data spaces working group at Eclipse. There, my colleague Javier is a member of subcommittee 38 at GTC1, which is the one managing standards around data spaces. And the people there are fairly receptive and knowledgeable about open source. In other quarters, it's a different story. And myself, I tried to do things with Andrew Banks at Subcommittee 7 around software engineering and things like that. And he had set up what they call an ad hoc, which is a working group with a determined lifetime to discuss open source topics. And I ended up you know, being the only representative of a national body making a contribution there because no one cared. So Andrew was a bit disappointed, but he was trying to do his part to, you know, raise awareness and push the message. So sometimes you try and you fail, but some people are knowledgeable, some others not so much. So maybe they should realize first that this is important, and then maybe they will start to engage eventually. But yeah, some I think are a lost cause, unfortunately. And then maybe the passage of time will arrange things.
I won't be the Eclipse representative dealing with any of the standards committees. You can probably understand why. I think it's not about the transparency. Actually, quite a lot of the safety folks are on a public mailing list called System Safety, and I would recommend, if you can get onto that list, that's your chance to interact with people who have been involved in establishing the safety standards and setting the tone across multiple industries. So systemsafety.org is where you would find the list. A lot of those people are now either close to retirement or in retirement. But if you want a chance to get views on why things are the way they are, how things evolved, those people are willing to answer. But if you do look back in the history, you'll see I've asked lots of questions and I've been shot down lots of times by those guys. But I've done that because I want to make sure there is a public record of why they thought what they thought. In some cases, those guys can't possibly change because, you know, their whole career has been invested in, you've got to do the V model.
Yeah.
Right. And no amount of me saying, well, look, all software these days isn't that way. Well, okay, but all software shouldn't be in safety is their answer. It's all down to people in the end. And I don't want to suggest that I think those people are stupid. They, you know, there's been a lot of very good software engineering and safety engineering as a result of their work, but we are in a different world now.
Yeah.
So
I have one question that is going to be.
Maybe I just want to out me. I'm part of a of a local body, but I'm in the cybersecurity, ISO 21444, and I think open source at the moment is not yet there as represented in the safety standard also. Yes. And they're working now on the second release, maybe in the future. So maybe it's now time to make proposals to bring it in, and then it'll be in the next standard. And I think the people really want, most of the people want really guidelines how they can do more secure product, which means also more safe products in the future.
So I have one question, which is going to be probably for all of you, and then I will open the floor for some questions from the audience. I'm a project committer on something that Microsoft committed 3 years ago. It was built using Rust when no one was doing Rust, and we were called crazy by bringing Rust to an Eclipse project for an SDV working group. It is an in-vehicle service discovery service registry, and then an in-vehicle digital twin with connections and connectivity to the cloud and upstream to the data to the cloud 3 years ago. The project is basically unmaintained or less maintained. If I would like to make it ready to be certifiable and trustable, when should I start? Or how could I start? How can I learn from what you did with your protocol? How can you help me with the TSF to actually use and build the processes to make it trustable? Is there a view on the open hardware that I can use to ramp up and build a software close to the RISC-V? Why SCORE process versus TSF? And this is a very thought-provoking. And then last but not the least, you did it. You have a certified real-time OS. Should I just look at what you did and forget everything that these guys are doing?
I can start with that one.
Yes.
That's an easy one to answer. We inherited a certified code base. What we didn't inherit are its processes, in the sense, of course, we have existing documentation and all of that. But now we are starting to work on this in the open with a very different developer base that we had before. Previously, it was a commercial product. So of course they are their little team, they get acquired by Microsoft, and then it's an all Microsoft team. And now we are transitioning this to a true open source project. So in this case, I'm really willing to adopt the proposals of our friends there as much as possible, because we're not starting from scratch, but we can rebuild things in a way that makes sense for a modern approach to safety. And, you know, we can be guinea pigs and being beaten by, you know, assessors or auditing bodies then. The code is there. We know that it's been certified already. So it's not like we are uncertain about its certifiable state. So to me, there's an opportunity there. And certainly, well, I'm only speaking for myself now, so I would need to check with, of course, we're a meritocratic Eclipse project, so I need to check with the other committers, but I don't see anyone who would be truly opposed to, you know, try something else and try to streamline, automate more, and try new approaches. So no, please learn from those guys and don't do what we have been doing, because we had no idea what Microsoft was doing. No, I'm exaggerating, but yeah, they were using a very classical approach. And I think we need to be forward thinking, not trying to reestablish 100% of what was done before.
Perfect. Markus, why should I follow the SCORE process?
Let's say I don't know your code bases at the moment, but my answer would be, depends on if you analyze your code bases and you identify gaps or whatever it's needed, and maybe either you have one solution or you need a combination of us. I don't see that we are on a different ways. We have different focus, and we can team up together, I think, to bring everything efficiently together to reach our common goal. So at the moment, we focus very really on new development. But as I said, if you want to have contribution and so ever, and we need to set it more up, maybe then we use these tools or other approaches. But at the moment, we are just on the begin. So, but normally, an assessor would say, we make first a gap analysis about your code, and then I can give you an answer otherwise. Thank you for the consulting answer.
I would like to come back to one of the examples I showed in my slides today, which is Bosch making this proof of concept for an ADAS system, detecting objects like pedestrians walking or cars coming in front of a car. So I personally like this approach because they do have an existing system which was based on ARM, but now they are switching it to RISC-V. The RISC-V core they are using is not yet safety certified, so they have put in the core. And I think it's also what you said, Paul. It's not only checking the checkboxes, it's about having the knowledge why you're doing it, what you're looking for, and what's really important to get it done. Yep. And that's what, in this special case, we saw Bosch was doing and applying. The nice thing is that they also have recontributed these changes in the code base to open hardware. So now that is available to others. It's not fully, you still will need to do some work. And very important, it's also not a certification. It's possible to get it certified, but it's not the full job done. Also what Frédéric said, it's of course a safety element out of context. So you're still need to verify it when you're the manufacturer of the chip and then the manufacturer of the car. You always need to verify it in the context. What I'm personally seeing is that in this open source, we need to start somewhere. At Open Hardware, for example, we do have an existing code base. We didn't have the pleasure to go with the V model, but you still have a way to also do this in retrospective perspective. You still need to have some documents documenting what was an idea or so on. That is possible. We have seen this also in other projects. So I think we need to start making step by step, and we need to go forward. There need to be definitely some update. There need to be also some willingness to say, yes, we do have this process, and yes, there was a reason for it years ago, but we need to adjust to new possibilities, to a new speed of time, because things are changing more fast. So I think we are, in general, on a positive way. There are still some things we need to convince. And I really like what also Daniel said, maybe because here no people inside from these committees, we need to change this and look for more dialogue just to make sure we are talking to each other. But in general, a lot of companies have a lot of expertise in-house. And I think that's where we need to start changing with the mindset. We are not crossing checkboxes. We are really thinking about how to make this thing safe, at least from the hardware point of view.
Thank you. Coming back to your project.
Yeah.
Yep. So if your project is dead currently, then there's no one to make promises about it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to step in as a previous committer, someone who now is taking an interest, I would say first you've got to ask yourself whether you want to make promises to the extent of saying you're going to do everything you can to ensure that this is safe for other people to use, right? I think generally you might want to get commercial backing for those kind of promises rather than have your personal liability on it.
Yeah.
Right. And I do think this question of model for Eclipse is still one that needs to be discussed. And so I raised some comments on the functional safety process already, and Wayne has commented back. So I think Eclipse is still wrestling with this also. To me, it seems completely unreasonable that safety promises are required to be made by volunteer developers, as you would be in this context, right? So there would need to be some commercial sponsorship and support to ensure that you could safely do that. And that then leads to the basis, as we were talking about earlier with Daniel's presentation. The road to safety is not a short one. You know, it's not really shortcut, just do this magic, you know, wave the TSF wand or apply the ESCOR process and you're safe. It's not like that, right? There are years of work ahead, right? TSF, we're trying to make it a very low bar. Maybe the bar is already too high by choosing doorstop. But, you know, it's a list of 25 promises and saying because it's in a graph structure, we can add a score for each of the 25 and then we can get to an overall score, right? So the first step for someone trying to get comfortable with the idea of this project might ultimately be used in safety would be to start doing the hygiene stuff of, do we know how we're building it? Do we know where all of its dependencies are coming from? Can we handle changes? So your project's been dead for 3 years or whatever it is. Can you now demonstrate that you can work with the latest compiler and, you know, all of the dependencies updates? If you can start to show that level of discipline, then it may be feasible to start thinking about what kind of promises you could make in a safety context. So let's, you know, crawl, walk, run, rather than.
But I really like your point, and the intention of the question was not, of course, because it's a dead project.
Sure.
Right? It's really about how should we think about as open source committers, developers, and who is backing us for those liable products with hardware that is potentially going to be out, right? Like you said, and I fully agree with that. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's exactly what I was looking for. Daniel.
So you were asking how you might benefit / how we might benefit together.
Yeah, in general, as a collaborative group.
I think like my point of view would be that this is at the heart of why this open source thing makes sense. Because like what I started to do for our project, what I talked about earlier, like if I make that work up to a certain degree for our project, that's going to be great. If I make that work together with Holger, if we also make that thing work for like Ankaios, for example, that's going to be the start of an exponential growth in usefulness. If we make it work together for your thing, you know, we get 2 times 2 times 2 or whatever. Like essentially what I'm saying, we are starting this. If you're interested, please let's do that together. I don't know where it's going to end. I don't know how, you know, fast it's going to be, but I do know that the more people kind of chip in, we're going to get there faster and better.
Indeed, fully agree. So we don't have time for one question from the audience. Just one.
Not be a dictatorship, Sarah. You go with the flow.
No,
somebody dares to have a question?
John, come on.
My question, I think, is for Paul. What do you mean you can't use Copilot for safety? What's the matter with you? No, kidding. That's not my question. By the way, I never said that. Nor did the video. Anyway, no, I wanted to follow up on the prior discussion. We've had a lot of, I think, very encouraging things today about where we are at a community in general. And I think we've heard very encouraging things about the state of ESCOR, and I want to focus in a little bit on that, Markus, if I may. I think what we heard is, you know, you guys are open to making sure that you can take on, you know, elements from other projects and figuring out somehow how they would be assessed and ultimately certifiable from a safety point of view, which I saw as being almost a sort of part way of a sort of bridge towards the world of trustable software framework and the stuff that Paul's bringing in with the new project. And your answer to Filipe right just now was, well, you know, we absolutely could, you know, look at bringing in your project in some way. I guess my challenge to the ESCOR team would be sort of twofold. Number one is, would it be possible for you to take on, as you think about building out the scope of the ESCOR middleware, looking proactively at the existing portfolio of Eclipse SDV projects to see whether some of those incorporation of might actually help avoid reinventing the wheel and at least make an informed build new versus reuse old decision. I think I'd love to hear that was the approach that was being taken, you know, from an analytical point of view. And I think, you know, we'd respect the decisions that the ultimate project team makes. And the second one is, I mean, I do think, and Paul made the comment earlier, we need some sort of integration around process. We don't necessarily need to solve the problem of, you know, you need a process right now for developing some of the new code that you're building right now. But ultimately, you know, we need for the community and for people going to use this distributable software, we need a target process that the community can embrace, and ideally it does need to be one, and that starts tomorrow with some of the logistics. So I think if we could find a way of starting to resolve that, I think it would be brilliant. So that was my sort of question / challenge. I don't know if you wanted to comment back.
Come on, it's two questions
No.
between us and the beer.
Hey, you said one question. I thought I'd pack it a bit.
Yeah.
Join the six together, and maybe we can start discussion that.
Hopefully, if you're available, we can
Continue the discussion.
I leave already, but we can.
And again, thank you so much for your contributions. Yeah, the dictator. Thank you again. Okay.